Hello, this is Brian Hansel. What you're about to see is a series of still photographs taken in India during 1996 when I was sent to work on a Bombay newspaper with a Sunday Mirror colleague called Rick Papineau. First, I'll show you where we stayed. The Taj Mahal Hotel was founded in 1899 by India's first industrialist, Mr. Jamshedji Tata, who had been outraged by the whites-only policy operated by Bombay's most luxurious hotels. He made sure the Taj was the grandest hotel in the whole of India and quickly drove most of his European-owned rivals out of business. This is the entrance to a huge reception area which forms a link between the original hotel building and a modern extension. There is a coffee lounge, one of the best bookstores in Bombay, and an arcade of shops which sell goods at European rather than Indian prices. A unique feature of the Taj foyer is the message system. If there is a phone call for a guest, a messenger walks up and down the reception area with the guest's room number on a metal placard. As he walks, he shakes it up and down to sound the metal rattles which are attached to either side. The Taj is so busy and there are so many messages that this seems to be a full-time job. The interior of the old section of the Taj is even more impressive than the outside. The corridors take the form of wooden galleries, which in the daytime are brightly lit from above thanks to skylights in the top floor. This is the main stairwell, viewed from below. The same sequence of colours and patterns is repeated up to the 5th floor, so the overwhelming impression is that you're looking at a lavishly sculpted chocolate cake from the inside. Stepping through a set of glass doors at the foot of the stairwell, you leave the air conditioning behind to plunge into the hot and humid atmosphere of a Bombay spring. This open-air swimming pool is the centrepiece of what is now the back of the hotel. Before the extension was built, this area was the main entrance. Overlooking the pool from the north wing of the hotel, you can see 2 bedroom windows with balconies. The one on the left was Rick's room, and the one on the right was mine. Here's the view from my balcony. In fact, this was the only time I opened the windows during a 3-week stay. The atmosphere outside was so humid, and the air conditioning inside so cool and pleasant, there was simply no incentive to sample the fresh air. This is my room from the inside. There's my battered old leather Gladstone bag, and the straw hat which I carried all the way to India, then wore just the once. Blitz is a weekly tabloid newspaper based in Bombay. Its offices are in the centre of the city in a building that looks almost derelict from the outside. A lot of the city's buildings look exactly like this. The streets are very busy and there are roadworks all around, just like at home, but in India they don't use mechanical diggers. They have whole families, fathers, mothers and small children, to carry the soil and rubble away in large metal pans balanced on their heads. Inside, the Blitz offices are very basic, but the paper is produced on computer equipment as up-to-date and powerful as the system we use at the Mirror in Canary Wharf, and the journalists here still have office boys to make the tea for them. Our trip to India was to help relaunch Blitz as a brighter, more readable newspaper, and here are some of the people we worked with. Philip Chacko, with the beard, is a writer, sub-editor, and one of a small number of Indian Christians in Bombay. Anish Basu, from Calcutta, is the chief sub-editor. Here's Rick, who's on the left, talking to the editor of Blitz, Sarosh Bana. Between them is a chap called Arvin, who's a page layout artist. And here are the 2 of us emerging blinking into the daylight after a morning's work in the Blitz building. When you next see us working, it'll be in much more pleasant surroundings. Our first weekend in India was spent in the hills around 50 miles southeast of Bombay. The owner of Blitz, a man called Karl Mehta, drove us to his country home near the town of Kandala for a 2-day conference with his senior staff. We knew Karl was rich, but we didn't realize just how rich until we saw this house. It was built to his own design, and it used to occupy the most prominent position in these hills until the local chief minister built a bigger one higher up the mountain, just to go one better, according to Karl. The house has a beautiful landscaped garden. Here's Rick taking a picture on the lawn, and months pass by between Karl's visits, but he keeps a domestic staff of 3 on permanent standby. Moving inside, there's just one main room on 2 levels. Because the walls are nearly all glass, there are views across the hills from 3 sides of the building. As you can see, the house has been interior designed with lots of expensive looking art and fresh green foliage, all apparently chosen by Karl's wife, Rita. Here are a few group photos with the Blitz staff. From the left there's Rick with Raju, the news editor, Anish, the chief sub, Shrikant, the art director, Karl, our host, and Sarosh, the editor. Outside we have Sarosh, Shrikant, me, Karl, Rick, Raju, and Anish. Philip Chacko, who you may remember from the pictures in the office, was supposed to be present too, but was banned by Karl for some office misdemeanor. On Sunday morning, Karl's driver took us into Kandala for some shopping. These are motorcycle rickshaws, which are actually banned from the centre of Bombay because they cause too much pollution. There was a street market in progress, but all we bought was some chicky, a type of nut brittle. This is a typical Indian lorry. It reminds me of the long journey from Bombay to Kandala and back. This takes 3 hours each way over dusty potholed roads, with huge and filthy trucks and buses, and the occasional air-conditioned Mercedes like Karl's, all trying to overtake each other 5 abreast. Meanwhile, little children play in the gutter only inches from the thundering wheels. The whole journey felt like one long near miss, and I was very glad to get back to Bombay in one piece on Sunday night. Just outside the Taj Mahal Hotel on the Bombay waterfront is the Gateway of India. This giant arch was built to commemorate a royal visit by King George V in 1911, and it was opened in 1924. As well as being the city's foremost landmark, the Gateway of India is also the landing stage for ferries to Elephanta Island, which is about 6 miles away across the bay. The island is a very popular tourist attraction because of 4 cave temples which were carved out of the rock in the 8th century. Boats leave the Gateway of India every hour for the 4-hour round trip to Elephanta. On an ordinary boat like these, the trip costs 35 rupees, which is around 60p. A luxury boat with a tour guide costs 15 rupees more. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to go. The area around the gateway is always crowded with sightseers, snake charmers, street traders, and beggars. If you're European and staying at the Taj, you'll attract your own crowd of beggars as soon as you step out of the hotel. That and the intense humidity make it all too easy to stay in the air-conditioned comfort. But if you do venture outside, you can take a pony and trap ride along the waterfront or walk a few blocks to Colaba Causeway, a bustling street of shops, bars, and cafes. At night, the floodlit arch looks even more dramatic. It's made from yellow basalt and contains a mixture of architectural styles, including Gujarati, Islamic, and Western. Although it was built as a celebration of the British Raj, the Gateway of India is also the point from which the last company of British soldiers left the country when it won its independence in 1948. From Bombay's Gateway of India to Delhi's India Gate, we flew to the capital for 2 days to meet some of Karl's political friends. In the end, we didn't meet anyone, but we did do a lot of sightseeing. This triumphal arch is at the eastern end of the Rajpath, a grand ceremonial avenue. Here's the view from the other end, with India Gate in the distance. The Rajpath is very wide, with ornamental gardens on each side. This whole area of Delhi was designed on a grand scale by Sir Edwin Lutyens and built in the 1920s. These official vehicles, along with nearly all the taxis and private hire cars in India, are locally built versions of the Austin Ambassador, a British model from the 1950s. Cows are sacred to Hindus, so you can't kill one or eat it, but you can put them to work, and this one was mowing the lawn outside one of the State Secretariat buildings. This building at the western end of the Rajpath was the home of the Viceroys of India before independence. Now it's the official residence of the Indian President. Here's an unsuspecting tourist about to be mown down by a government car. The building in the background is called the Sansad Bhavan. That's where India's House of Commons holds its debates. Another sacred cow, this one just sitting by the roadside as buses and motorcycle rickshaws pass by. This road was outside the Delhi home of one of Karl's political friends, but after waiting for nearly an hour, we left to do some more sightseeing instead. We caught a taxi into the old town to visit the Red Fort. This was built in the 17th century and has red sandstone walls more than 1.5 miles long. Once you pass through the covered shopping arcade at the entrance, the Red Fort is a city within a city. The Mughal emperors built palaces, halls and temples inside. Today it has lost many of its treasures. In its heyday the emperor would sit upon the peacock throne in the hall of private audiences. The throne's feet were solid gold. Its canopy was inlaid with diamonds, pearls and other gems, and a parrot carved from a single emerald was perched behind the emperor's head. This priceless creation was stolen when a Turkish raider called Nadir Shah plundered the fort in 1739. Some pieces of it were built into the peacock throne used later by the Shahs of Iran. We left the Red Fort to head for the great mosque about 1 mile away, but there were no taxis to be seen. Eventually we set off on foot through the hot, crowded and fume-choked back streets of Old Delhi. We weren't sure of the way, but we found it in the end. Here it is, the largest mosque in India. You have to take off your shoes at the entrance, and a young boy immediately attached himself to us as a guide. We had to walk for a long time to find a cab. Then, after a late lunch at our hotel, the Delhi Hilton, we set off sightseeing again. This is the Lakshmi Narayan Temple, which was built in 1938. You might think that this was an insensitive moment in history to build something covered in swastikas, but the swastika was a symbol of good luck for Hindus and Buddhists for centuries before it was adopted by the Nazis. We had to take off our shoes again, and flowered garlands were hung around our necks. After a visit to one of the shrines inside the temple, our foreheads were marked with a small red spot. This is commonly known as a bindi, but on a man the correct name is a tilak. Anyway, it's the sign of a blessing. Here are a few more views of us at the temple. Finally, we set off back to the Hilton in a motorcycle rickshaw. This was our first ride in one of these things, and it was just as noisy, bone-shaking and fume-choked as we had imagined. Good fun though, and that's our farewell to Delhi. Our second Sunday in India was the first entirely free day of the trip, so Rick and I hired an air-conditioned car and a driver to take us on a guided tour of Bombay. This was booked through the hotel and cost us £10 each. Only a few minutes' drive away is the 280-foot tall Rajabai Clock Tower. It's the kind of Victorian Gothic design that might look more at home in a wet Lancashire mill town. Opposite the clock tower is a big open space where there's always a game of cricket in progress. It's called the Oval Maiden, rather appropriately. Rick came back here in the afternoon to watch the match. This beautiful old building is the Victoria Terminus, Bombay's main railway station. It was designed by Giles Gilbert Scott, who was also the architect for Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral and the National History Museum in London. Heaven knows why, but they don't like anyone to take photographs inside the station. Rick took just this one shot before we were asked to put our cameras away. This is the Crawford Market, built in 1867, where the stalls are piled high with fresh mangoes and every other type of exotic fruit. The guide showing us round also took us several streets away to a dreary clothes shop, probably run by his family. This is Marine Drive, which stretches most of the way around the large natural harbour known as the Back Bay. Further along the road is Chowpatty Beach, which is our next stop. Swimming and sunbathing aren't very popular in India, but the beach is still a favourite place for families. They stroll up and down, stopping at food stalls and watching gymnasts or jugglers. When we stopped, there was just a crowd of beggar children who followed us around. I can't be sure of the name of this temple. I think it's the Lakshmi Narayan. That's the same name as the place with the swastikas in Delhi. This one is older, and it's a busy place of worship for local Hindus. Anyway, after my picture of Rick from below, here's his picture of me from above. This is the Haji Ali tomb, a mosque built on a tiny island where a Muslim saint is said to have drowned. It's reached via a long and narrow causeway. You can just make out in the picture that there's a queue of people all along its length. Here's a view looking back over Chowpatty Beach from the Kamal and Nehru Park, which along with the neighbouring hanging gardens is a favourite place for Bombay families to go Sunday strolling. It's a park for children, laid out in 1952 and named after the wife of Pandit Nehru, India's first leader after independence. Near one of the main suburban stations is the Dhobi Ghat, a huge laundry area with channels and pools full of grey-looking water and whole armies of washermen and women. If you look at the bare-chested chap in the foreground, you can see how they seem to bash the dirt out of the clothes rather than use soap. Our final stop before we went back to the Taj for an afternoon by the pool was the Prince of Wales Museum. You could spend several days in there, but we made do with a lightning visit of around 30 minutes. We stayed in India for another week and a half, but we were working more or less all the time, so that's almost the end of this photographic tour. Among the presents I brought home from India were some Indian clothes. A salwar kameez each for Melanie and Sophie, and a shirt with a Nehru collar for Matthew. And that really is the end.